I'm the dude. So that's what you call me.
Are you a virgin?
Yeah, not since I was 10.
Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret.
Come out to the coast. We get together, have a few laughs.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
Can I return it if it doesn't fit?
It always fits. Eventually.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Movie Mingle, and this episode 2, we are talking about the movie Parasite, which Maggie had never seen before.
Never seen. Never wanted to see.
I have seen it multiple times. A little bit about Parasite. It was directed by Bong Joon-ho, written by Bong Joon-ho and Han Jin-won, starring Song Kang-ho, Park Myung-hoon, Lee Sun-kyun, and Park So-dam. It won a ton of awards, 309 awards across all the award shows, and then for the Oscars, it was nominated for 8 and won 6 of those. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, Best International Feature Film, and then Best Production Design and Film Editing. It was a juggernaut the year it came out. Back in 2019, I think I watched that Academy Award show, but it was a long time ago. I don't remember much before the 20s.
It should be noted that this movie has a lot of themes of the cultural and economic disparities in Korea, stuff that we know next to nothing about. I have done some research over the past couple days into how life is in Korea, and
this is why most of Bong Joon-ho's films are about the class system in Korea. Snowpiercer very much was a movie about the different classes, how the poor has to fight their way to the front of the train, where each train ahead gets richer and richer and richer. So all these people in front of the train are living the life of luxury, while the people in the back are eating grounded up cockroaches.
Isn't there also cannibalism in that movie too? Don't they eat people at some point?
There might have been a person who fell into the grinder, but it was mostly cockroaches.
And I do want to start off by saying I really never wanted to watch this movie. For no other reason than I just kind of didn't want to. Sometimes you look at a movie and you see all the praise around it and you see everything about it, but you look at it and you go, I just don't have the time for that. Admittedly, I fall into that sort of mindset a lot. Well, when it comes to movies, whereas Caveman will definitely watch everything. Whether he likes it or not, he watches everything, and I'm a lot more picky. I honestly would rather watch the same movies over again than watch new movies, just in case I consider it a waste of time.
I like to watch all movies because the movies in the middle are always going to be the ones that you're definitely going to watch. It's the ones on either end, the prestige or the art house films. And then on the other side, you have the just garbage.
The Meg 2.
The Meg 2.
You either have the Prestige or the Meg 2 and very little in between.
I can sometimes find the really bad ones highly entertaining when they are at least dumb fun.
Back to Parasite. It was not necessarily a movie that I wanted to watch or cared about. And it is literally for no other reason than I was never really in the mood to watch this film. I don't like horror films. I don't really like thrillers either. And knowing what I knew about this movie, it just didn't seem like it was going to be my cup of tea. Caveman has been trying for a very long time to get me to watch it. I've always put it off just because I really didn't care. But here we are, second movie in, me having to watch a movie that I wasn't initially excited about. And I have not told Caveman what I feel about this movie.
No,
up until
I'm going in this completely blind. I have no idea what her opinion of any of the movies that she's never seen that I don't already know her opinion of. Just going into it blind and listening to it live on the podcast. So, Maggie, what did you think of Parasite?
I thought it was an incredible film.
Wow.
I know, victory for him.
all this time.
It was an incredibly put together film. It was beautiful. It was heart-wrenching. It was terrifying. It was very weird. I'm not 100% sure that I understood all of it.
I don't think I've understood all the details of the movie. I get the basics, we'll talk about it as we go through the film, but the basic premise is the class system and Parasite being leeching off of the rich for their money, but also reverse that, it's even a double meaning where the Park family is also a parasite.
Going back to my opinion on the film, I did think that it was a very well done film. I did spend the latter half of it with my mouth completely wide open and my hands covering my face because fuck, is that a roller coaster? My boss, whom I was speaking to about this movie, was talking about how the midpoint of the film is a doorbell ring, and it goes from something that's sort of idyllic and straightforward, which is the Kim family trying to get in with the Parks and get in with their wealth, and then after that doorbell ring, it all goes to hell, literally. We should say that we are going to spoil the hell out of this movie. So if you haven't seen it, go watch the movie and come back and listen to the podcast. If you don't care about spoilers or you have seen it, well, buckle up, buckaroos.
The story essentially starts with you see the family living in this
sub-basement
dwelling. Yeah, it's a sub-basement. You can barely call it a house. A poor family living in this half-basement apartment in a busy lower working class commercial district in Seoul. Ki-woo is the son of the Kim family. He has dreams of going to the university. He is a very smart young adult. Everybody in the Kim family is...
Everyone in the Kim family is
very
so
clever. I don't know about the education of the parents, but their children definitely have a higher education or are just naturally intelligent in the way of being able to work their way to the Park family.
They are excellent bullshitters.
They are excellent bullshitters. And I don't know if that was something that their parents raised them on how to do, or if they were just naturally that talented when it came to on the fly making decisions, coming up with bullshit.
I kind of feel like it was a little bit of both, because you see it at the beginning when they're pressuring the pizza lady into not only giving them another chance to keep folding the boxes, even though a quarter of them were damaged and unusable, but also like there's a certain way where the mother, sister, and son of the Kim family kind of surrounded the pizza woman and were all talking very quickly over her and over each other and sort of convincing her to not only give them another chance, but also potentially fire the person that has been working with her and give one of them the job
instead.
So I do think that it is a mixture of just sort of naturally good bullshitting and being taught. I was raised myself by a very good bullshitter, and I would like to think that that talent was passed on to me.
So you see how the Kim family lives immediately with the beginning of the film. They're in the sub-basement. They stick around for the extermination while they're folding these boxes.
Leaving the
windows open so that they can get a free extermination.
They deal with the man peeing on their window, essentially.
Which brings me to Ki-woo's friend, who is the one who is leaving town to go to university, which I guess does tell you that Ki-woo is not in a university.
He kind of considers his friend as not being much of a threat. He knows that some of his university classmates would be a threat romantically towards this young lady. And I think that's another reason.
You think that's the only reason, or do you think he was a friend too?
I think that it was mainly because he knew that his friend needed help and needed some money, but I also think he knew that his friend wouldn't be a threat.
So yeah, Min, his friend, does plan to date her once he returns to Seoul, and she herself is old enough to come to university with him.
This young teenage girl was being taken advantage of by these, 20-something men, which is always super creepy.
So then we're introduced to the Park family. They're wealthy. They've lived in Seoul for 4 years, and a very, very beautiful house.
Oh, an absolutely stunning home.
Designed by a famous architect named Nam Gung, who is talked about quite a bit in the movie, but I don't think Mr. Park even knows who this man was or that he even bought a house from a famous architect. Somebody we meet later knows plenty about Mr. Namgoon, but didn't ever seem like Mr. Park cared or knew the house that he was living in. Obviously, nobody told him about a secret in the house, which, as a homeowner, you would hope somebody would have told you about that, but I think it's explained later why.
Mrs. Park is quite naive. To put it simply, everybody in that movie takes advantage of how simple and naive Mrs. Park is, which is upsetting because she was such a good soul. Her character is sweet. I think that her character cares
from her point of view. I think most of the time she wants the best
for her children,
for her
family.
And she's taking that role as mother and housekeeper
very seriously. Yeah.
She absolutely wants both her children to succeed and be of a higher status, which I think is why she's so worried about her daughter learning English and her son's artistic abilities.
And also her son's trauma. In the movie, we learn that the son saw a ghost on the night of one of his birthdays, which caused him to go into a seizure and have a bit of a medical emergency. And ever since then, the kid has been a little, I guess, kind of like ADHD coded, if you will. You know, he's very... He's a little boy. He's bouncy. He runs around a lot. He's obsessed with Native American culture, especially stereotypical Native American culture. And he's very artistic, often drawing these kind of horrifying, very odd self-portraits with a dark figure lurking in the background. And Mrs. Park is understandably concerned about her son, who's like 10 maybe?
About 10, I believe.
About 10 or so. She's very concerned for her son and his ability to function and just live in the world, which is why she puts so much effort into his supposed art therapy and just for caring for him. A lot of the movie seems to be about caring for the son and giving the son whatever he wants, while I felt like the daughter was sort of the afterthought. Even though the daughter is older, it was the focuses on her were much more of her studies and whether or not she can get into a good college and learn English well, versus the son, who seemed to kind of get anything and everything he wanted. So he was also a little bit of a spoiled kid. I kind of feel like they didn't care as much about the daughter. That's the vibe that I got, that she wasn't as important as the son, especially to Mr. Park, who, in what interactions I can remember, he always seemed to be kind of short with his daughter versus being very loving and attentive to his son. From what I have read, there's still a pretty big gap between the sexes in terms of the workforce, what they're expected, what is expected of them. So I found that interesting. I don't know if that's something that you caught on to, but I definitely caught on to that the daughter felt like she was a bit of an afterthought.
I really liked the way the Kim family was able to weasel their way into the lives of the park, starting with the son and getting in because of his friend, who obviously was more interested in her. He got in. He bullshitted his way. They did all this work to make
a forged university
forged documents, and she barely even looked at them.
Mrs. Park
barely. This isn't what I care about. And then he goes upstairs and she watches the first interaction with the new tutor and her daughter.
Which was also a very, I kind of took that as a huge bullshitting moment.
Huge bullshit. He just grabs her wrist.
Yeah, and feels her heartbeat to tell whether or not she's lying.
Yeah, and
pretty sure the Mythbusters busted.
Just the terrible bullshit manipulating.
Both
this
women.
Is how you have to take a test.
Yeah.
The things he's saying.
Yeah, he's very much manipulating both women into trying to come off as more intelligent and, a proper tutor.
But they're buying it. Yeah, they're buying it. And then on the fly, on the way out, he's like, "Oh, your son. I know he's an artistic kid. I just happen to know this person," and it was like, I have a friend of a friend.
Yeah, it was off
it had
the
to
cuff.
be so far removed from him.
Yeah, that he knew some random person.
I just know this random person, and then once the daughter shows up, then she
she kind of weasels her way in by, talking about her quote-unquote art history background, which she later admits that she, Googled about 2 minutes worth of art history stuff and then made up the rest. She's coming in as a art therapist to help the son with his supposed trauma of seeing said ghost. And really, I think, like, every time it cuts to the son, the little boy, and the art history daughter, the art therapist daughter, it always just seems like they're just hanging out and coloring, but she also tries to keep the kid away from his parents, and I think that she's trying to keep the parents out of it because she doesn't want them to see that she's not actually doing anything.
Right.
They are just sitting and coloring.
I don't think it was planned beforehand.
No,
I think it was off the cuff once again.
On the drive home.
On the drive home, takes her underwear off and hides them underneath the seat just to be found later.
Yeah, just so that she can frame the driver and get her father in as the new driver.
Which, okay, one of my favorite parts after they talk about her father possibly coming in as the driver, it cuts to the father and the son at a Mercedes dealership, going through all the adjust the mirrors here. I can adjust this, all the
they're
little
basically
doodads
learning how to operate the car to make it seem as though the father is well experienced.
But what a fun, I just like the inclusion of that scene, just showing you that they don't just automatically know these things right away. They do have to do some homework.
There's a lot of prep work that they go through that is shown in the movie, and I thought that was brilliant.
Studying scripts, guessing what the other person's going to say and being right about it.
Yeah, they're really good con artists. More than anything, this family is a family of con artists that are using their wits to get ahead in, a poor society. And it's sort of a fascinating look into maybe nature and nurture, because if this family had have been born wealthier, I think they would have been very successful. Both the children in the Kim family are incredibly intelligent, and there's no reason why they couldn't have been wildly successful except for the fact that they were born to a poor family instead of a rich one. It's not like in America where people have the chance, quote unquote, to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and possibly land a life of better wealth and status. I kind of feel like the class system in Korea is more of like what you're born into is what you're stuck with, and it takes a lot of time and effort to get into a different sort of
I mean, we see at
status.
the end of the movie what all the steps the alternate universe version of him, if that's how you want to say the movie's ending, but there's a lot of different theories on what the ending means.
The Kims are a very smart family, and the Parks are incredibly smart as well, but I think they're naive and comfortable in their wealth. They don't see these wolves in sheep clothing coming in and kind of taking over their family, which is best depicted in them attempting to get rid of the original housekeeper and replace them with Mother Kim, where they use the original housekeeper's peach allergy against her in a brilliant way.
And the first time I saw that, I thought it was so dark that this family was causing this poor woman, this innocent woman, just to have these terrible allergic reactions to, like, what if it killed her?
What if it killed her? Yeah, they didn't know how serious the...
how far were they... I mean, we see how far
they
were willing to go.
But just the time and effort that they take to put into getting rid of that woman and supplanting the mother is brilliant. But again, if this family had a different status, they could use that brilliance to do better things instead of just costing an old woman her job and a bit of an allergic reaction. Also, I would hate to be allergic to peaches. I fucking love peaches.
And even before the peaches, they were already trying to separate the housekeeper from Mrs. Park. Mm-hmm. When the daughter wants to talk privately with the mother, and the housekeeper was like, no, I'm the housekeeper here.
Yeah, like...
And then the daughter essentially was like, no, you need to leave. And then Mrs. Park immediately changes her mind because she believes that the daughter is this brilliant art therapist, and she's going to say I'm going to follow your every...
There's a lot of manipulation going on against the poor Park family from the beginning. And it's sort of delightful to watch. I mean, it was a very fun experience watching the Kim family wiggle their way in to the park. And I think that they got too comfortable too fast, especially in the scene. It's a bit of a montage or one track where it shows all the different family members of the Kims being their respective parasites to the parks. But, like, getting a little handsy with each other, like, at one point, Father Kim grabs Mother Kim's butt, and they're, like, sneaking food and stuff. So I think that they got very comfortable very quickly in their roles in this household, which I think is ultimately a part of their downfall, although their main downfall was kicking out the old housekeeper.
That was what...
Yeah, that
if
is
they
their main
had
downfall.
kept her in there, but
And
they really wanted the mom in there.
They got greedy. They got greedy,
They
essentially.
did. Yeah, because they probably could have done well with the three of them working in there, but they're like, no, we need a job for mom. Yeah,
And
kicking out the housekeeper definitely was the
that was
idea.
that was the beginning of the end. So there's a scene in the movie where the Park family goes away for a little weekend holiday, and the Kims essentially move into the house and treat it like it is their own home. I have some experience with this. I know for sure that anytime my in-laws would ask us to house sit when we were a young, poor married couple, we would move right into that house and just turn on the air conditioning,
kick up our feet, watch the TV, eat the food.
Yeah, use their internet. Like, we moved in, did laundry for free. We moved in.
And I think they
house.
expected us to do all that.
Yeah, because
I mean,
we're
we are
family.
house sitting, and they knew we were living there.
But also...
But it just feels like you're on vacation because you're in somebody else's house. So they finally get rid of the housekeeper by telling Mrs. Park that the housekeeper has tuberculosis.
TB.
And the kind of probably the cheesiest part of the movie for me is when Mr. Kim squirts the hot sauce on the tissue and then holds the tissue up and it looks all
like
blood, and it's like the perfect blood tone. And
yeah, I've never seen a hot sauce that
the music
color.
at the same time was like really like over the top, and that was like the one moment where I was like, oh, this is really cheesy. So most of this movie was all shot in a studio. Even the outdoor scenes of the house were in a studio. Just some really great set design. The scene when the family's playing outside, when they have the house to themselves and they're enjoying time outside. I think one of the characters is reading a book on the grass.
Yeah, the sun's just laying
the sunset
in the
is
grass.
the sunset's going down.
Taking a bath.
Yeah.
So the Park family goes away on vacation. The Kims move in, and they're enjoying a night of drinking somebody else's alcohol and relaxing and laughing and having fun when there's a knock on the door.
동네 시끄럽게. 누구세요?
안녕하세요.
So right before that doorbell rang, Caveman stopped the movie, told me to go to the bathroom, get a snack, get another beer, and in general just sort of prepared me because he said, we will not be stopping the movie from now until it ends. He kind of set me up and made me a little bit nervous for what was about to come.
I knew as soon as I said that, too, I was getting all the anxiety up about what was going to happen next in the movie. I didn't mean to. I just want us to have to pause it at any moment for the rest of the film, because I feel like as soon as that doorbell rings, shit gets real.
Shit got real. So the old housekeeper comes in and is talking about how she forgot something in the basement. And, of course, Mrs. Kim has to hide her family, so the family kind of all hides away because they're not supposed to be there. They clean up really fast. And the housekeeper comes in, the old housekeeper, and she wants something out of the basement. She goes down to the basement and is actively trying to push open a large cabinet, only for us to discover that behind said large cabinet is a sub-basement where her husband lives. And her husband has been living there for several years?
The Park family has been there for 4 years.
That was around the time that the husband moved in, from
right?
what I gathered. So he's been living in the subbasement for free, hiding from loan sharks, while the housekeeper, his wife, has just been going about the job, sneaking him food. There is a line where they say that she eats enough food for 2 people. So clearly she's been sneaking food to her husband. And when she finds her husband down in the subbasement, he's starving, very weak. And if you've seen the movie, you know what happens next. The Kim family is discovered by the housekeeper and her husband. There's a recording of them. There's a whole blackmailing thing going on. Like, it gets ugly and gets ugly fast.
Well, just the rest of the family sneaking down the stairs behind their mom. And it's like, what are you doing? Why
stay upstairs. I don't think I can stay upstairs, though.
Out of curiosity, they just get closer and closer to the edge, and then they finally fall.
Could you have stayed upstairs?
If I knew that there was a secret basement?
But they don't know.
They don't know, no.
No, I don't know if I would have. I would have been hiding in that stairwell as well.
I mean, curiosity.
Yeah,
just like,
what is
this? What is this sub basement, and why is this woman so interested in it? I definitely did not. I could not have predicted that there was a man living underneath this house.
No, but then you kind of come to understand that he's the quote-unquote ghost that the young boy saw when he was trying to sneak up one night to get food from the kitchen. And he was, that actor was set up to look terrifying. Wild eyes, half balding,
especially
kind of
slowly walking
skin.
up those stairs, the way the scene was lit.
Yeah, it was very creepy.
I would have been screwed up as a child too if I had seen that.
I shit my pants if I had seen that.
Then they also reveal that every time Mr. Park walks up the stairs, the old man living under the building presses the corresponding lights to his walking up, almost as if you think they are motion detected, but it's just him paying respect to this man every time he walks upstairs.
Yeah, paying respect to the man who's housing him.
Whose house he's into. Respect.
He also uses the light for Morse code, thinking that the husband, Mr. Park, would have known Morse code because of his time in the military and because he's a smart man. So he also sometimes plays out or writes out letters to him in Morse code, which I don't know if big house or not, oblivious or not, I feel like I would notice if one of our lights started randomly blinking and not in any particular pattern. You'd think you'd also notice if the lights came on for you every single time you went up a certain set of stairs.
Once again, I think he's completely oblivious to this house.
He's complacent and thinks that it's just
just part of the house. And it's interesting too, because if you go back, they show you this happen throughout the movie before you realize somebody lives under there.
Mm-hmm.
The lights turn on only for Mr. Park. Anytime somebody else goes up the stairs, they don't turn on.
Oh, I didn't clock that.
Yeah, of course, it's something you have to catch the second, third, fourth time you watch it.
So, creepy man in the basement, the family finds out, shit happens, and they all end up captured by the housekeeper and her husband, who are essentially holding them hostage with a video that shows that all the Kims are related and that they've somehow been, using the family. And in doing so, it allows the housekeeper and her husband to live for a moment in the lap of luxury, to sit on the couch, to just enjoy and be at peace. And of course, all this comes to a head when the Parks call and say they're coming home. They're coming home early.
If you didn't think the doorbell was one way of ringing in something crazy happening, as soon as they get a phone call saying, "Yeah, we're going to be home in 8 minutes" or something like that, it was.
It's pure chaos.
It's that moment when you're having fun with either a sibling or a friend at your house or somebody else's house.
And then all of a sudden, parents are coming home.
Parents are coming home in 5 minutes.
You've got to run
dishes
to clean
everywhere.
The house. We have all been in that moment where you're shoving shit under the couch, you're hiding things in cabinets, you're hiding people, shoving them out the door.
And she's, at the same time, the mom is making a dish that she has no idea how to cook,
which is so good.
Seems to pull it off because nobody said anything about it.
I did also find it very interesting, jumping ahead just a little bit, that Mrs. Park eats the entire dish without giving any to her children or her family. She meant to have the dish made up for her son, but she just sits down and eats it all anyways, while telling the story to Mrs. Kim about the ghost.
In the moment, the son was preoccupied with sleeping outside on a rainy night.
Yeah, having a teepee set up and all that.
You mentioned teepee, and that just gets the whole thing, how obsessed they are with American Westerns.
Not even just American Westerns. It is Native American specifically like Western material. It's not just cowboys and quote unquote Indians. It's just the Native American side of things. He's shooting a bow and arrow, there are headdresses in the movie, and it's sort of very interesting to watch another culture take something that is of American culture, and especially Native culture, and turn it into a huge stereotype. Bong Joon-ho actually has a very interesting quote about it, where he likens it to somebody wearing a shirt with a Che Guevara on it, not because they agree with his revolutionary status, but they just think that the shirt is cool. But it is interesting that the little boy is sort of obsessed with Native culture.
I think the boy has also gotten his mom a little obsessed with it as well, because she is so happy to tell people that this is from America, or that is American.
It's very much a status thing that she's getting all of these
imported.
Imports.
Yeah.
So they set up the tent for the little boy in the backyard, and then the Parks, thinking that they're alone in their house, lay down on the couch to watch their boy, out in the yard, thinking that they're alone, only to find out that 3 of the Kims are underneath the coffee table right next to them. And then what proceeds is the most uncomfortable sex scene I've seen in a while. We did also kind of skip over the fact that they managed to get the housekeeper and her husband down into the basement by some pretty brutal means. The housekeeper absolutely suffers a severe head trauma by being shoved down the stairs and hitting her head on the wall.
So hard.
And on top of that, they also used a peach to subdue her. So this woman is not only suffering an allergic reaction, but she also has a head trauma, and now she's tied up in a sub-basement with her husband, who's bound and gagged. I do consider that the most brutal death in the movie, especially for her husband, who has to watch her succumb to those injuries. It's no wonder he goes crazy later on in the film. That was fucked up, what they did to that poor woman. And it all happened so fast. I don't even really consider any of these family members murderers. It just shows you how quickly shit can go real wrong. And it was shocking. It was horrifying, actually, to see that scene. And then to just have them all kind of not forget about it. I don't think any one of them forget about it. But they had to put it away in order to hide under that table while the Parks sat and did their thing, waiting for them to eventually fall asleep. It definitely made me uncomfortable seeing them get intimate, only because I knew that there was somebody right there. There were 3 people right there, listening into every one of those very intimate actions, and it's creepy. As a married couple, it's creepy. So I found that scene very, very deeply uncomfortable. They also bring up, for the first time, and maybe I think it was the first time, they bring up how Mr. Kim smells, how he kind of smells like a poor person, and that's how they know that he's poor, because of his stench. And I think that he really took that as an insult.
But it was interesting how the kid was able to point out, like, that person and that person smell the same, and they both smell like that tutor guy. And they were like, it does. Then they're like, do we have to start doing our laundry with different soaps and different washes? Do we have to? And it
was something that the mom didn't want to do, because she's the one having to do the laundry.
Yeah.
So she didn't want to wash everybody's clothes
she's
separately.
taking care of 2 families now.
So can we talk about the Kims descending all of those staircases into a literal shitstorm?
Yeah, walking down from essentially heaven, the richest area they've come to know, and just slowly descending into hell, further and further down, and like just the way it was shot.
So beautifully shot. All of them just like slowly, and I mean kind of stumbling too, because you'd have to think that not only would that be physically exhausting, but after what they had just gone through, fighting for their lives, murdering a woman, hiding from their bosses in a very creepy way, like all of that, only to walk into just a torrential downpour and just having to go down and down and down and down. My knee would have said fuck you and given up.
And then you finally reach the place where you live, your official, like, this is your actual
home.
And it's waist high, chest high in
shit.
Sewage water.
Yeah. Like, my main thought that I had while I was watching that scene was really, they thought they smelled bad before. And I was like, there's no way they're getting this stank off.
There was a moment, it's a scene coming up after this whole thing where Mr. Kim is back in a like collared shirt and slacks again. Like they had to have bought brand new clothes.
Well, there is a scene.
There's no way because he was there like the next day picking up Mr. Park.
Yeah, I found that weird too. Like, when did they shower? There's a scene where they were in the shelter. It's a very quick little scene where they're in the shelter, where you see the daughter and the son picking out new clothes from a huge pile. There's like a giant pile of clothes,
You're
and they're
right.
picking through
I do
it.
remember that.
So that leads me to think that they found the nicest clothes that they could. There's that scene where Mrs. Park is in the car with Mr. Kim, and she kind of holds her nose,
Right.
indicating that she finally kind of smells his funk. Going back to that flooding scene, I found it was just terrifying. And apparently that's a huge problem in Korea because there's so many sub-basements that are being lived in. Flooding does happen, and people get sick and injured because
And of course,
that.
the first things that go for are the things that mean the most to them. Mr.
Yeah.
Kim grabbed. There were multiple medals displayed in his house, but he grabbed one specific one, and I couldn't tell what that.
I think it was the wife's medal. The wife won a medal for whatever sport she was in, and that was the thing that he grabbed.
And the son grabbed that massive rock slab.
The Scholar Rock, which is meant to bring good fortune and wealth to the family that it belongs to.
Even in a shitstorm, those are the things you're going after.
Yeah, and the sister decided to take that all-important time to access the internet, find her cigarettes, and look at her phone while sitting on a toilet that is just spewing
all that sewage
shit.
just
So yeah,
vomiting.
they all went for the things that were most important for them, and she went for her cigarettes. Like, I found that very odd. And what a horrifying thing to just have to experience all around. We are luckily not in an area that floods, but if we were, I would be constantly afraid of it. I think that flooding is one of my biggest, like, natural disaster fears. Behind tornadoes. It goes tornadoes and flooding. The next day, the Parks decide to hold a birthday party for their son for the first time since several years before, when he saw the ghost and had his little freak out. Which, that poor kid in birthdays, he is fucked forever.
The art therapy must be helping.
The art therapy must be helping. Yes. maybe the daughter Kim does actually know what she's up to. They decide to hold a party, kind of a last minute impromptu, that they put together. The elder Kims, the mother and father, have to help set up the party, while the younger Kims get to come and enjoy the party. And that leads into the scene where the son has a moment with the girl that he's tutoring, where he's too lost in thought to make out with her. And I would like to bring up now that their relationship was super creepy. Not only the way that his friend had a crush on her, but also that, he then goes and connects in a romantic relationship with her. Do you think that was planned by him, or do you think that happened on its own?
I wonder if he was ever actually interested in her, or if he was just playing the part to get more and more into this family's life.
I mean, there's that moment where they talk about how if her and him get married, this would be his in-laws' house, and they kind of joke about that. But legitimately, if they fell in love and got married, his family could never be a part of their lives.
Right, which is why they were talking about hiring actors to play his mom and dad.
But that is such a deep lie. I mean, that's a lie on a lie on a lie, and so on. Like, that shit's hard to keep together.
I think that they were looking at this as a possible long-term, and
they were trying to play the long game.
They were going to keep doing it until they couldn't, and I think, nobody could have predicted that there were people living under the house, which actually brings me to a part when Mr. Kim first sees the gentleman who lives underneath the house. He looked at him in almost disgust, like, how can you live down here? How can you live like this? And he himself was, like, moments later swimming in shit.
Yeah, like he thought he was above the caretaker's husband, but you're right, like seconds later, he's just literally floating in shit trying to save his most valued possessions. Yeah, they definitely start to kind of ascend, I think mentally ascend into the wealth of the Park family without having gotten it yet. But then I did say earlier that they settled into these roles kind of too quickly and too comfortably. They definitely, as soon as they took over the house, they treated it like it was their house instead of working slowly into. If they'd taken more time and less risks, none of this would have happened.
I really enjoyed it, kind of like not a montage, but a series of scenes edited well together of showing you what each family at the moment of that storm was going through. You had one family who was trying to save their possessions from a flood of shit, and then you have another family where a man is watching his wife slowly die from a concussion.
Oof.
And then you have another family who is just dry and warm and enjoying a stormy, rainy night in their beautiful house. And
yeah,
it just
you're right.
shows you
The privilege that the parks have.
right. And but even it just kind of goes each layer with the rich, and then somebody just watching the love of their life dying, and then
Somebody
another
else
just
swimming through shit
Right.
to try to save their life.
Right.
Like, yeah, that is a very interesting point that I didn't clock onto, but yeah, it just goes to show how, wealth brings you a certain amount of privilege where you don't have to worry about something as simple as rain. They are, housed and fed and happy, but they don't really care about everybody else who's suffering in the same rain. At the party, the worst birthday party ever. This is such a bad birthday party that Niles and Frasier would have done a better job. Shout out to all my Frasier friends who get that joke.
some deep cuts.
That is some deep cuts. I actually wrote that down too. I also want to point out that I wrote down the word ugh with 10 G's when writing about the relationship between the tutor and the girl that he was tutoring, because I really, really disliked that part. It just made it so creepy. And another part that made me kind of cringy too is when Mr. Park and Mr. Kim are in the bushes and headdresses wanting to jump out and attack the cake. It was a choice. It makes me uncomfortable.
Right, but he's at the same time, like, in that moment, do you think Mr. Kim was feeling like Mr. Park was just taking advantage of him? I mean, that's kind of the whole, like, the way...
That is kind of the point of the scene, isn't it? You're right.
Like, I'm supposed to be a driver, but you're just like, here, I'm throwing some extra cash at you so that you can...
do whatever I want you to.
Be a clown at my kid's birthday party.
And after a night of horrific trauma, not even just that he killed a lady, but also because his entire life was just flooded with shit.
Mr. Park doesn't care at all what happened to him the night before.
No, he doesn't even ask.
Even if he told him, Mr. Park wouldn't care.
Yeah, it's like they were all expected to drop everything to come to this party and be a part of it, because there was nothing else they could do. They were in too deep that they couldn't take essentially a sick day.
And that goes back to the double meaning of Parasite, where it's even the rich using poor for their own gain, like a parasite would.
So not only is I just kind of got that. Not only are the
that's what we're here for.
Oh my God, the Kims are parasites on the Parks, but the Parks are parasites on the Kims. It was deeply disturbing seeing the husband of the caretaker coming out covered in blood, having bashed his head in all night.
Well, right before that, he had thrown a huge stone slab.
Oh God, yeah.
Onto the boy.
You know why I didn't think about that moment? Because that was my least favorite part of that whole
I was
movie.
wondering the whole time that I knew that was going to happen. I was waiting for your reaction.
I think I guessed and jumped very loudly.
I was convinced that that boy, if he wasn't dead from the first one, he died from the second one.
Oh, he died from the second one, for sure. How did that kid survive?
Well, which brings me, I mean, that's kind of, I know we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but that's essentially the whole end of the film.
I will say that when he bludgeoned him to death, super shocked, didn't see it coming, did not need the extra scene of the guy dropping the rock on the son's head and watching his whole body shudder. Oh, I hated it. It was so, I don't like gore, and it wasn't necessarily gory, but it was viscerally very ugh, if you get that. And then he goes on a rampage against everybody else. Do you think that his intended purpose was to kill the Kims, right? Because he didn't really go after the Parks.
Right, because
He
he's
knew what they
blaming-
looked like.
he's
Yeah.
blaming them for his wife's death.
He even yelled
Respect.
he kept yelling the name of Mrs. Kim over and over because his wife was like, don't forget what her name is. Get revenge.
Sure.
He stabs the daughter in a wound that I kind of thought was survivable. I kind of thought that the
She would
daughter
survive
would
and the boy
survive
would
and the
die,
boy
but
would die.
They switched it around on us.
Yeah, they did. And of course, the poor young kid sees this all again on his birthday and has another seizure. Like, it was a whole shit show of violence and terrible things happening. But ultimately, the daughter is stabbed. The little boy from the parks has a seizure. The mother has a bunch of defensive stab wounds.
Even though my son is dying, I still need you
Yeah.
to drive my car.
Yes.
Not I could just
I'm going to do it myself.
I could just push this body off
Yeah.
the car keys, grab the keys. Instead, he
He's
insists
insisting,
that that Mr. Kim grabs the keys, and
Yeah.
then once Mr. Park actually does get the keys, he's takes the time to
yeah, he takes the time to
You
be
stink.
grossed out by the smell
Yeah.
of the dead man in his backyard. Not because he's dead, but just because of that's his smell. That guy must have been ripe. Holy shit.
But he really had to point it
Yeah.
out. Like, holding these keys, being in your presence is just so disgusting.
Yeah.
I can't stand it.
Because that moment in time was more important to him than even his own dying son, and that costs him his life because Mr. Kim grabs the knife and shoves it right into Mr. Park's chest. I did not see that coming. I think that was the part that for me I was like, oh shit, because now there are two families that have been left, three families that have been left completely,
Yeah.
devastated
Three
by
families
this
affected by all
this one action of bullshittery. It literally, like, if the son had never said, oh, I know a girl who can do art therapy for you, none of this would have happened. But again, we wouldn't have been talking about this movie if that had happened. So what's the point of what ifing? So the dad gets away.
Yes,
the
he-
dad manages to escape.
On his way out, he decides, "Oh, I'm going to go back into the garage and
Yep, go back into
I know
the
exactly where there's
subbasement.
a hidden entrance." And I just went down there and
Disappeared.
disappeared. That's his life down there. Closed
Yeah.
the door. No way of communicating as far as like no phone or
Yeah, no, he can't contact his family at all, especially because the police think the mother, so Mrs. Kim, and the son get put on probation for fraud. And they he even says that there have been cops following them, clumsy cops following them, hoping that they would lead the cops to the dad, but they genuinely don't know where the dad is. They don't know for a while.
And it's interesting that, eventually we learn that the dad communicates through Morse code because there's a Morse code sheet. But we also know that the dad is able to leave the basement because he buries the housekeeper out in the garden.
He's able to get out when the house is empty.
Right. But you would think that there'd be easier ways to communicate with somebody through Morse code if you can get out of the basement that you're locked in.
Yeah.
I know he doesn't want to get caught. It's just like the other guy who was down there because he didn't want any loan sharks to find him. And you would
What
think,
would the dad have done if he'd gotten out? Like,
right, where would he go?
Yeah.
If you're a wanted man. I'm guessing people are just very easy to catch once you're out in the open.
Yeah. Like he couldn't drop a letter in the post to his family. No, because the cops probably would have caught on to that.
But the fact that the boy is going to the house to get a straight view of that light bulb turning on and off.
How does he know to go there? Do you think that he's just there to look at the house?
I think
I kind of got the vibe that he was just there to visit the house.
in the hopes that his dad would turn up.
No, I think it wasn't even in hopes that his dad would be there, just that he wanted to just he couldn't get away from the house. It was still a part of him. It was like his salt burn. He wanted to be near the house. And then he notices the light flashing on and off. I don't think he was there hoping to see a sign of his father. He might have been. But I kind of got the vibe more that he just couldn't stay away from the house.
Or maybe he was trying to be with the Park's daughter again.
Well, no, because they moved, remember? And
That's
a
right.
new family moved in.
Yeah, I
Which
forgot
does
about
bring
that.
me to one major pet peeve that I have about this movie. Yes. And this is because I have a very weird knowledge of very weird things. Everybody talks about that family being German, but they are actually Swiss. When you see the magnets on the fridge, you see the Swiss flag, you see the Lucerne Bridge, and you see the Canton seal for Bern. But everybody keeps calling them German, so, you know, they're Swiss.
For anybody who's wondering about that.
If anybody was wondering, they're Swiss. This is who I am, guys. I can't.
So there's a couple theories on the ending of the film. One is that he died from getting hit over the head, and now this is his afterlife, or he's seeing the afterlife, or it's his vision of what happens eventually. It's probably the weaker of the theories because of the story that's told later.
Yeah, he interacts so much with everybody, with his mom.
The dialogue is like a written letter. You know, it's a communication between the father and son, just using Morse code. Yeah, between the two of them.
Which, by the way, would take for fucking ever.
It's such a long message.
It's such a long message.
Between two people who barely know Morse code.
There's a lot of unnecessary descriptions in a letter written in Morse code. I mean, there's a reason why they just say SOS.
But one of the theories is that the letter he is writing is a letter of hope that may not come into fruition. So one of the ideas that maybe this is either a dream while he's in a coma, or it's just a hope written in a letter, was that a doctor and a detective wake him up, and the doctor and the detective are so backwards in their casting. Like this is just something I've been looking over.
Oh, this is one of the theories.
It's one of those theories, but because the doctor looks more
like a cop would,
and the
cop
looks more like what
I
a doctor
did think
would.
that they did kind of look strange.
Like they were cast wrong.
Yeah, or they wore
purpose.
the wrong costumes. That's interesting. But because of that, that's why people think that he's dead.
Or in a coma,
Yeah.
or just the letter was just a letter of hope that didn't actually happen. It's like, Dad, this is what I hope happens.
Well, yeah, the way that I read into the ending is that he writes back to his father saying, like, no matter what, I will do what it takes to buy this house and free you. Essentially the happy ending, but I don't think he actually does. I think that when you see this sort of beautiful future montage of him buying the house and the dad coming out to be reunited with his family, I don't think that happens. I genuinely think that that is just what he hopes to do. That is his dream, but that dream never comes true. I don't think this family gets a happy ending. I think that when it cuts back to the kid in the basement writing the letter, and you kind of just see the view out from that sub-basement, I think that's the reality, that this kid is stuck there forever, and he'll never see his dad again.
Right. I don't think the dad and the family are ever reunited.
No, I don't think so either. And, you know, ultimately, it's all his fault, because he was the one, again, that in a split-second decision decided to say, hey, I know a girl who can help your son. That was the snowball that turned into an absolute shit avalanche that broke this whole family apart, that broke 3 families apart. So it's interesting. That son has to live with that, and I think that it's going to fuck with him for a very long time. But it was a great movie, and I enjoyed it. I am sorry it took me so long to watch, but I'm glad that I watched it like this.
I'm glad I got to finally watch it with you. So Maggie, like we usually do, I have 2 questions for you.
Kick it.
Would the presence of Oscar Isaac being casted in this film, would it have made Parasite even better?
One day the AIs are going to look back on us the same way we look at fossil skeletons in the plains of Africa.
No. I know that's not too shocking because we've only asked this question a couple of times now, but I think that the presence of Oscar Isaac, the most beautiful man in the world, would have been distracting because he is not Korean. There would have been no reason for him to be in that film. If there was like a picture of him on the refrigerator, I would have been fine with that. But no, I don't think he should have been included in this film.
Well, that brings me to my second question, which is kind of designed to ignore the first question. Because no matter what, you have to pick a character that Oscar Isaac... Yeah, he has to replace one character. Yeah.
Oscar Isaac would have been the weird detective at the end of the movie.
I feel like that's a cop-out.
Oh, I'm going to high-five him for that. So, yeah, Parasite was a great film. I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad that you got to watch me watch it. I'm glad that we got to talk about it. If you have any thoughts on Parasite or the podcast in general, you can reach out to us at movieminglepod@gmail.com. We also just started our Instagram, which is also movieminglepod on there. What would you rate Parasite? 1 out of 5.
Oh, 4.5.
I'd give it a solid 4. It was a great film. I don't plan on ever watching it again. I might.
Oh, I've seen it so many times.
But yeah, it was a great film. Very well done. So I definitely give it a 4.
Well, that's the end of this episode. If you guys liked it, please listen to more. We've got a few of them on there now.
Like and subscribe. Is that a thing for podcasts?
I don't think it's a thing for, well, if you're on Spotify, you can rate us 5 stars.
And if you are on Apple Podcasts, you can rate us as well on there too. Be nice to us. We're trying.
And stay tuned for the next episode.
Are you an effective team?
We are an effective team.
Let them fight.
How did you just do that?
I'm a really good lawyer.
Here on Caladan, we've ruled by air power and sea power. On Arrakis, we need to cultivate desert power.
Welcome, Mr. Beach. Or is that Bond? I'm a little confused.
Well, we wouldn't want that, would we?
I don't want to brag, but I will. I was in the Avengers.
The Avengers?
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. What is that?
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
Toga, 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 toga.